Senator from Wyoming.
At the time, I would contest a few of the things that my colleague from Illinois said, but I'm not going to make a political speech. I'm going to talk on the bill that's currently before the Senate, which is the China currency bill. So I rise today to speak on the China currency bill. China's underevaluation of a currency is a serious problem. It's an issue I've studied when I was a member of the Senate Banking Committee and now as a member of the Finance Committee. Earlier this year, I also had an opportunity to visit China with a number of my colleagues and learn more about this issue as we met with their government officials. It's clear that the efforts of the Chinese government to peg its currency against the dollar give unfair benefits to the Chinese exporters at the expense of U.S. manufacturers. The United States should take additional action to pressure their government to reevaluate the Chinese currency. However, it's not a new problem. China currency has been a priority for both President George W. Bush and President Obama. Through a number of venues, including the Joint Commission on Commerce and Trade talks, our officials at all levels have raised this issue with little response. This experience shows that action by the United States alone is not enough. We know that other major global trading powers have the same concern, but we continue to act individually. Just this summer, the German government made a renewed attempt to gain more flexibility in China's currency. The full European Union has followed suit, but they too have had little gain. But the United States and the European Union are not just the only ones concerned about China currency. A number of emerging economies, including both India and Brazil, have also made the same plea. So the question I ask now is, why are we considering a bill that puts the United States in a position of going it alone? That's one reason why I'm a co-sponsor of the Hatch Amendment number 680. This substitute amendment retains the designations included in the underlying bill that define a, quote, fundamentally misaligned currency, end quote, while giving direction to the administration to pursue action through multilateral channels. The amendment also thinks forward by making the issue of currency misalignment a priority issue in both our current trade negotiations and in future trade agreements. It's important that the United States not act by itself when it comes to pressuring China on this issue. I found in my experience that when it comes to economic policy in our globalized world, the multilateral approach is the most successful. That's one reason why I do not support imposing unilateral economic sanctions on any nations. I'm hopeful that the Senate will have an opportunity to vote on and include the Hatch Amendment in this bill. I also want to speak about an amendment I'm working on with my colleague from Oregon, Senator Merkley. Given that this bill is about enforcement of trade obligations, we filed an amendment that would encourage our officials to counter-notify those nations that have failed to report on the government subsidies that are provided to industries engaged in international trade and in competition with us. The World Trade Organization Agreement on Subsidies and Countervailing Measures establishes base rules for when members can provide subsidies. An important element of that agreement for compliance is a measure that requires each country to disclose information about their subsidies annually. China agreed to these obligations in 2001. However, since joining the WTO 10 years ago, China has only made its required notification once. That was in 2006, and it was largely incomplete. The amendment we have offered requires the U.S. Trade Representative to use its authority under the WTO subsidies agreement to counter-notify a nation that has failed to meet this obligation 2 years in a row. I am told the U.S. Trade Representative plans to act this afternoon by submitting information to the WTO that identifies China's failure to comply with this requirement. I'm hopeful that this will lead to accurate and consistent reporting by those governments that continue to disregard their trade obligations. This problem with reporting subsidies points to the larger issue we have with China, aside from currency misalignment. There are other significant Chinese policies that put the United States at an economic disadvantage and deserve our attention. One such policy I want to highlight is China's policy of giving value-added tax, VAT, rebates to artificially promote exports. On April 1st, 2009, China reinstated a 9% rebate of its 17% VAT tax on soda ash exports, another instance of China manipulating commercial outcomes through a government industrial policy. In 2009, during the depths of the global economic crisis, China's soda ash exports increased 9%, while global demand for soda ash was in free fall. That same year, the U.S. exports of soda ash fell 19%. This is just one of the countless examples where China's producers pay little attention to market conditions and instead are being driven by artificial incentives to export. Continuation of such a policy puts U.S. jobs in the soda ash industry at risk, which is why I've led an effort to have our government press China for the elimination of the VAT tax rebate on soda ash. The U.S. natural soda ash industry employs over 3,000 workers in Wyoming and California, another 100 dock workers in Portland, Oregon, as well as railroad workers who help transport soda ash. Half of all workers employed in the soda ash industry are dependent on exports for their jobs. The U.S. soda ash industry is an export success story. For the first time in 2010, the U.S. soda ash industry shipped more product to overseas markets than it did to domestic customers, and exports continued to grow in 2011. Domestic demand for soda ash is flat, so growth in the U.S. soda ash industry is entirely dependent on maintaining and expanding its exports. The United States is the most competitive soda ash producer in the world, but it will continue to be confronted by China's trade-distorting policies that put it at a competitive disadvantage. Specifically, China's VAT tax rebate on exports reduces China's production costs. It undermines U.S. soda ash exports in other markets. Moreover, Chinese soda ash is produced through a synthetic process that are both extremely harmful to the environment and energy intensive. China's manipulation of its VAT tax rebate has been raised multiple times by members of this chamber, as well as our House colleagues. On May 31st, 2011, we asked Commerce Secretary Gary Locke and U.S. Trade Representative Ron Kirk to keep this issue on its agenda with the Chinese and fight for its elimination. I would seek unanimous consent to insert the text of the following letter to Secretary Locke and Ambassador Kirk in the record.
Without objection.
For over 2 years, China has provided its domestic manufacturers with an artificial incentive to export through the 9% VAT tax rebate on soda ash. When this incentive is removed, a truly competitive market can be restored for global exports of soda ash. I look forward to a lively discussion on this issue when the U.S. and China meet for the Joint Commission on Commerce and Trade Ministerials this fall. Mr. President, Madam President, I don't want to underestimate the importance of the China currency issue. However, this debate cannot overlook the significant trade imbalances caused by other Chinese government policies that disadvantage U.S. industries. If you ask our officials, they won't hesitate to say that the currency issue is just the tip of the iceberg. There are countless tariffs, subsidies, and non-tariff barriers that keep the United States out of China at the cost of U.S. jobs. That's why I'm disappointed that my colleague, the Majority Leader, has not yet allowed members to offer the amendments on trade and jobs they wish to offer. Our economic policies with China extend far beyond the currency issue, and this bill should be the forum to raise and debate those concerns. This bill has been sold as a jobs bill and a trade bill, and therefore should be open to amendment about jobs and trade. Allowing amendments now is especially important, since this is yet another bill brought directly to the floor without the benefit of committee consideration. Our companies and exporters are among the best in the world, but it's tough for them to succeed when other nations allow competitors to ignore the rules that they've agreed to follow. Without a doubt, something needs to be done about currency misalignment in China. However, to be successful, We have to take a holistic approach. I'm hopeful that the Senate will consider these ideas, including the Hatch Amendment. If the U.S. continues to go it alone, we'll continue to have the same problems. We must consider legislation that not only authorizes U.S. action, but encourages the administration to pursue the currency issue with other nations that may have the same concern. Madam President, I yield the floor.